As I was saying, today's learning should be a zchus for shlema for all those that need it. Okay.
What's me?
So we are first of four Mishnayos today. So again, Mishnah second line, Kuf Yud Ches Lamed Aleph. Hagozel es chaveru, o shehilva mimenu, o shehifkid lo. So one of three cases: either you've stolen money from someone, you borrowed money from someone, maybe you have a pikadon of someone, you're a shomer chinim of sorts. But the tzad hashava, right, is you currently have property that belongs to someone else. Bishuv lo yachzor b'milver. If you borrowed it, or you stole it, or you got it as a pikadon in the city, in the yeshuv, don't give it back to him in the midbar. Meaning, if you stole it in the yeshuv, you got to give it back in the yeshuv. But al minas, let's say it's midbar, yachzor b'midbar. If you made a tanai at the time when you, presumably not when you stole it, but when you borrowed it or when you took it as a pikadon, right? If you said, I can give it back to you even in the midbar, then of course it's going to be okay. The Gemara's even going to ask it. That was the tanai. Of course you could do it. But again, the general principle of the Mishnah is if I borrowed money or even if I stole money in the city, I got to give it back in the city. I can't just give it back. You know, if I happen to bump into him somewhere else, I can't just give it back to him. What? Well, certainly maybe if I borrowed money or something like that, then he can say like, listen, when I'm home, that's where I can take care of it, right? If I'm somewhere, if I'm on vacation, I don't want a whole stack of cash right now. You know, that's not good for me. So, but we'll see. But bottom line, the case that the Gemara is going to focus on is the case of the loan, where again, if I borrowed money in the city, I got to give it back in the city. Can't just choose where I want to give it back. We're a menu, but we have a stira, we have a brisa that says milvet, mishalemes bechal makom, that when it comes to a loan, I can repay it wherever. Avedo bikadon mishalman alvim koman. The brisa says that when it comes to an avedo or bikadon, I could only pay in the right place. But again, we have a stira. Our mission seems to say that when I borrow money, I have to pay it back where I got it from. But this brisa seems to say I can repay it anywhere. I'm a rabaya, pachi kamar. No. You're misinterpreting the brisa. The brisa really says is milva nitna litava b'chamar. A loan is such that the lender has the ability to claim the loan, right? He can be tovea the loan anywhere. Avedo pikadon lo nitnu litava elavim koman, as opposed to an avedo or a pikadon where you don't necessarily get the, you can only expect the person to give it back to you where he took it from. And this really makes sense. If you think about it, if in the relationship of a lender-borrower, the lender is really doing a favor to the borrower. So therefore, the lender can say to the borrower, wherever I am, if I want to get the money back right now, I can make a claim, right, that you can pay me back. When it comes to an Aveda, imagine, right, I say to Alan, right, I found your thing, and we're here in Shul, and all of a sudden we bump into each other in New York because, hey, you got my thing? No, I don't have your thing. Your thing is back in Chicago, right? So, like, I'll give it back to you when we're in Chicago, right? Same thing with, you asked me to be a Shomer Chinam. Fine, I'll be a Shomer Chinam, but I'm going to give it back to you when we're back home. I'm not going to give it. I don't travel with it, right? So that's kind of what this price is saying. When it comes to a loan, the lender always has the right to tovea the loan wherever. These other items, not so much. So then the second part of the Mishnah said al minas.
Even the first part of it goes though. It's an object, so you're not carrying it around with you all the time.
But again, I mean, the point is, even when it comes to, this price wasn't dealing with Zayla, but yeah. What?
It goes on money.
Yeah, but I'm saying the price that happens to not be dealing with money. But to the Mishnah's case, right? If I stole money from you here in Chicago, I can't go to you while we're on vacation and be like, by the way, I stole some money from you. Here's $10,000. You're like, what am I doing with $10,000 out in wherever? So when we're in Chicago, I mean, I appreciate, and maybe you'll take the money because you don't want to risk it. But in theory, let's wait till we're back home and then give me what you owe me. Okay. But the second half of the Mishnah said, al minas, if we made a tanai, then I can repay it even in the middle. All right, like we spoke out. If you make a tanai, you can do whatever you want. And again, we're going to focus on the case of, let's say, a shomer pikadon, for example, right? The amar lei, where, let's say, Ruvain said to Shimon, lahabi hai pikadon gabach, can you do me a favor? Can you watch this item for me to honor the minbar and the fikna, because I'm heading out of town. The amar lei, Ihu, and the other guy said back to Ruvain, right? Shimon said back to Ruvain, honor the minbar. By the way, I also happen to be going, to the wherever you're going. Let me look. So ibina ladrin Allah. Madrina lach. And this last line, it's actually a bit of a discussion among the various Mefarshim what the proper girsa is. But the bottom line is, whatever you think the girsa is, Rashi seems to say that the Shimon in our story actually says this to Reuven. I'm going there too. Therefore, if I want, I'm going to give it to you. right? Other Mepharshim say it wasn't really that clear. All he said was, I happen to be going there as well. And there's almost like this implied, understanding that, like, by the way, I'm happy to watch your thing, but I'm going to give it back to you if I want over there. So whether you just implied that, whether you said it, the bottom line, the way Rashi understands is we're not mafurish, you were making a t'nai. I'm only being a shomer pikadon on the t'nai that I can give it back to you wherever you want. You happen to mention they're also going to be wherever this guy was. And there's this understanding that therefore I can, if I want, I'll give it back to you wherever we are. And that is the studies of the Mishnah. Okay, Mishnah number 2. Ha'omer lechavero, gizal ticha, hilbisani, you go up to a person and you say, I want you to know, I once stole from you, or I borrowed money from you, or I'm a shober pikad, and you once gave me something to watch. And I'm just being honest with you. I have no idea if I ever give it back to you. I just have no idea. I know for sure that at one point I owed you money. I don't know if I ever paid you back. The Mishnah says chayiv l'shalom. In that case, you are chayiv to repay. Avalam amar lo eini yodem gizaltich imir velsani imif karat etzli patram l'shalom. But let's say you go over to someone and you say, "Listen, I'll be honest with you. I don't know if I stole money from you. I know I stole from someone. I don't know if it was you, right? I don't know if I borrowed money, right? Then you're already punished. So if I know for sure that there was a point in time where I owed you the money, I just don't remember if I repaid you, then I'm chayiv. If I just have no idea if I ever owed you money in the first place, then already you are pater. So the Gemara says, Itmar, this is a memra that we've had before in Ksubas, sounds like from the Mishra Zash. We're also going to have a number of times in Bava Metzia. But mana libi yadcha, alo omer eini yodea. One guy goes over to another guy and he says, you owe me money. And the guy responds, I'll be honest, I have no idea. So Reb Huna, Reb Yehuda Amar Chayiv. They say you're Chayiv. Reb Nachman, Reb Yochanan Amar Pater. Reb Nachman, Reb Yochanan Amar Pater. The Gemara explains. Reb Huna, Reb Yehuda Amar Chayiv. Reb Huna and Reb Yehuda say Chayiv because Bari v'Shema, Bari Adif. This is a classic example of when one of the two guys are a Bari, the other guy's a Shema, and we have a klal, Bari v'Shema, Bari Adif. And therefore, if one guy says, you owe me money, and the other guy, if he says, I don't owe you money, that's one thing. If he says, I don't know if I owe you money, then Bari v'Shema, Bari Adif, and you have to pay the money. Rav Nachman, Rav Yochanan Amri Pater, they say no, still, it's kind of like a all of a riot type of thing, and we leave the money with the muhsar. Do they not hold a Bari V'Shama Bari Adif? So the Pasha, you would say, is the case of a Bari V'Shama Bari Adif is where we have established an objective fact, right? There, we have a suffix right now. There, we have like the Machat Par B'Chamar, like those types of cases where we have something going on with a suffix. One of the parties says, I know exactly what happened. The other guy says, I don't know what happened. That's when you say Bari V'Shama Bari Adif. But over here, it doesn't sound like, one guy's just saying, you owe me money. The other guy's saying, I don't really know. Maybe we don't say Bari V'Shama Bari Adif. Okay, either way, that's the machlokas between these Amoraim, right? Where one guy says, you definitely owe me money, and the other guy says, I'm not sure. We have a machlokas, chayiv or pater. So we're going to try to prove it from our Mishnah. Tanakh. Our Mishnah said, Avalam Amar, listen to the second case of our Mishnah. Avalam Amar lo eini yodea im hilbisani, where one guy goes over to another guy and he says, I'll be honest with you, I don't know that I ever for sure owed you money. Right? Therefore, and in that case, he's going to be pater. So the Gemara says, hey, Chidami, what exactly is this case? If you're going to tell me that, like, Ruvain never even came over to Shimon to say, you owe me money. I mean, he got out of the blue. No one even said he ever owed him money. And he just said, I'll be honest, I might owe you money, right? But that would mean that Reisha Nami Delokatavale, just to keep the cases of the Mishnah consistent, that would mean the Reisha also, no one ever came over to our Shimon in the story. Shimon just came over to Ruvain out of the blue and said, one time I once owed you money. The Gemara says, am I chayiv? Then in that case, it's pasha to the Gemara that if no one was ever tovea you, no matter what you say, you shouldn't be chayiv. Maybe it's a peshas or peshahit or something along, some svara like that. But if no one was ever tovea you in the first place, it wouldn't make any sense that you were chayiv. Ella the Katavala, you're going to have to tell me that in both of the cases, the Reisha and the Seifa, someone had once came over to Shimon. Reuven came over to Shimon and said, I think you owe me money. And then Shimon said, in the Reisha, he said, you're right. At one point I owed you money. I'm not sure if I paid you. And that's when it's chayiv. And the Seifa is where he says, I'm not sure at all. Uktani Seifa, Pater Milashalim. And still, the Seifa's case, where again, Reuven came over to Shimon and said, you owe me money. Shimon said, I don't know that I owe you money. I don't know. And what does the Mishnah say, Pater? That seems to be going like the Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Nachman in our Gemara that said in a case of this Bari V'Shema, you say Pater. But the Gemara says, Lo, olam de lokatine. Like, really, I'll tell you that Ruvain never came over to Shimon at all. No one was ever Tobeah. How do you understand the Reisha? The Reisha that said Chayev, how do you understand that case? The Reisha, but in the Reisha's case, we're not saying you're Chayev midin like Choshen Mishpat. We're saying in a case where Rashi speaks out, specifically in the case of Gzela, where Shimon says, I know for a fact that at one point I stole money from you, and I don't know if I ever paid you back. Let's say Sidei Shamayim, you need to pay him back now. But again, from a pure Choshen Mishpat perspective, Ruvain can't force you to pay him. He wasn't even Toveah you, right? But let's say Sidei Shamayim, you need to pay. And Itmar Nami, we can prove this from a different memra. Amar Rav Chia bar Abba, Amar Rav Yochanan. So this is Rav Chia bar Abba said this in the name of Rav Yochanan. If a guy goes over to his friend and he says, you owe me money, and the other guy says, I don't know. Chayev. So you're chayev. Now, what do you mean you're chayev? Rav Yochanan just said in our Gemara that this is the case where you'd be pater. So why are you chayev? So it must be, but let's say Sidei Shamayim. So you're going to have to tell me that in this case where Rav Yochanan says chayev, he doesn't mean you're chayev from a Choshen Mishpat perspective. He means you're chayev, let's say Sidei Shamayim, and that's where we've kind of seen this play out. Okay, on to Mishnah number 3, and I will warn you, this is by far the most difficult of the 4 Mishnayos, or the 4 Gemaras that we're going to see today. The Mishnah seems very innocent. It'll get very complicated in a hurry. So the Mishnah says like this: Hagonev tle min ha'eder v'chziro. Let's say you steal a tle from an eder. The assumption is that the owner is aware that one of his sheep is missing. He had 10, now he only has 9. V'chziro, you return the tle, but you don't tell him. But now there's 10. Umeis o nignav chai b'achriuso. You haven't told the guy that he knows something was stolen. Right? You didn't tell him that you returned it, but you did return it. But then something happens. It was restolen from someone else, and the animal dies. Chayev b'achar yusuf. Right? Rashi, if you kind of look at this first Rashi by in the Mishnah, he says, the Mekiganva Kamle Birshuse, this is kind of these sugyas that we've been seeing a lot over the back half of Bava Kama. By you being a Ganev, you have some kinyan on it. V'hashava da'avad la v'hashava, it's not a good hashava because you didn't tell the guy that you returned it. So therefore, if something happens, you're still kind of on the hook. But lo yadu bailim lo b'gnei lo b'chazi raso. Let's say the owners were never even aware that it was ever stolen. They knew they had 10 animals, right? And then you stole it, but they were sleeping, so they didn't realize they only had 9 animals. Umanu vasatzon. They wake up in the morning, you've already returned it, and they see there's 10 animals. Ushlemahi pater. So in a case where they never even knew something was ever stolen in the first place, and then you never told them that you gave it back, then you're going to be pater. And while this Mishnah, again, it seems innocent, it's still stolen. Well, you did an Avera. But the point is, if you... Like you no. The point is, if anything happens to the animal now, you're off the hook. That's the after it's returned. So then someone else steals it, or it dies, or something like that, then already you did your hashava. Okay. So again, the Mishnah seems innocent, but we're going to see there's a 4-way machlokas and just how to understand this Mishnah, and it's going to get very complicated very quickly. So Amar Rav.
The whole point of this Mishnah has to do with responsibility for the object.
Exactly. Amar Rav. So Rav is going to explain the Mishnah basically the way we explain the Mishnah, the most simple way of understanding the Mishnah. So Amar Rav, ledas tzarech das. If the owner knew that an animal was taken, then the only way to do hashava is by notifying the owner that you're returning the item. Shelo ledas, but if he didn't even know that it was gone in the first place, minyan poter. Then so long as he counts the animals and he knows that everything's back, that's all it takes for you to absolve yourself of the responsibility. So taniu manu esatzon bihi shlema asefa. So what does the Mishnah mean when it says the guy counted his sheep and everything was there? That's going on the second case of the Mishnah, where the owner didn't know that it was stolen in the first place. Because if he knew that it was stolen in the first place, him knowing that all of his animals are back isn't good enough. You need to tell him that you gave his animal back, right? But so long as he didn't even know it was stolen, then as long as he knows that all of his animals are back, that's all it takes. So far, so good? All right, Shmuel Amar, every case is going to get progressively more lenient on the Gane. Shmuel Amar, Bain Ladas, Bain Shalo Ladas, meaning Pater. No. Even whether he knew it was ever stolen, whether he didn't know it was stolen, so long as the owner counts up his sheep and there are 10 sheep in his pen, that's all it takes. You are now, as a Ganav, you are now off the hook. V'chiktani umanu v'ishlema pater akula. So therefore, when this last line of the Mishnah says, and the guy counted up all of the sheep, and they were all there, and then the ganav is going to be pater, it's referring on both cases of the Mishnah, whether he knew it was stolen, he didn't know it was stolen, so long as he's able to count all of his sheep, you are now off the hook. So again, Shmuel's thing is if the owner, even if he knew of the Geneva, if he didn't know of the Geneva, so long as he counts all of his sheep and they are all there, the Ganav is off the hook. What's the case where the Ganav is going to be chayiv? What's the first part of the Mishnah? It must be where the Ganav knew something was stolen and he never counted his sheep. If he knew it was stolen but never realized that it was returned, so then you're going to have a problem. But so long as he knows it was returned, then the Ganav is going to be fine. Rabbi Yochanan Amar ledas minyan poter. If the owner knew that an animal was stolen, then all he needs to know is that the animal was returned. You don't need to tell him that you were the ganav. So long as he knows he has 10 animals, you're going to be fine. Shalol ledas, if he didn't even know it was stolen, then afilu minyanami lo tzarich. If he didn't even know it was stolen, then what he doesn't know can't hurt him, right? So if he didn't even know it was stolen, then you give it back and something happens to it, you're off the hook. The only time we're even going to say you require minyan, the only time you even need to know that, or the owner needs to know that he had 10 animals was when he knew an animal was stolen. So this is even like progressively more lenient on the ganav, right? So therefore, what's the first case of the Mishnah? What's the case where a guy's going to be chayiv? It must be where the owner knew that something was stolen and he wasn't able to even count it. He knew it was stolen. You certainly didn't tell him you stole it. He wasn't even able to count it. That's a case where you're going to be chayiv. But if he knew it was stolen and he was able to count it, and by the way, if he didn't know it was stolen, that doesn't matter what happens. The ganav is going to be off the hook. So again, the Gemara just says, so what does the Mishnah mean when it says you counted the zone and everything was there? It's Aresha. That's Gufa going on a case where he knew something was stolen. Because if he didn't know something was stolen, you wouldn't even need that in the first place. And Rav Chizda, Amar Chizda is going to be the fourth way of understanding our Mishnah. And this one maybe is the least intuitive. He says, Rav Chizda Amar ledas minyan poter. If the owner knew an animal was taken, then so long as he knows the animal was returned, you're going to be poter. But shalol ledas. But if the owner didn't know something was stolen, tzarich das. Then, and this is the least intuitive. If he didn't know something was taken in the first place, you need to tell him that you returned his animal. Right? So Rav, this is like the complete opposite of Rav. Rav, which was the first shita, which was the one that was maybe the most simple to read in the Mishnah, was if the owner knows something was stolen, you got to tell him you returned it. If he doesn't know something was stolen, then it's good enough that he just knows everything was back. He doesn't need to know something was stolen, as long as he knows he had 10 animals. Rav Chizda is the polar opposite. If he knew something was stolen, then all you require was that he was able to count his sheep and knows everything was back. If he didn't even know it was stolen in the first place, then you need to tell him that you returned an animal to him. You need to tell him that something was stolen, and now you gave it back. So the Gemara says, Amar Rava, so the Gemara just says, so what's the line of the Mishnah that he counted his sheep and he knows it was all there? That's on the Reisha's case when he knew something was stolen. Okay. Amar Rava, my time with Rav Chizda. Again, Rav Chizda was definitely the least intuitive. What's shot in Rav Chizda? And again, the focus is, if he didn't even know it was stolen in the first place, why must you tell him that you stole something and then returned it? So the Gemara answers, Hoal, the Ankita Nagri Briyasa. It's because it's an interesting svara. It's kind of like once this animal has had a taste of the outside, now he's more at risk to go run away again. So Bishlama, if the owner knows the animal was stolen and he knows the animal was once gone, so as long as he just knows that it's back, at least he knows I got to watch this animal a little bit more carefully, right? Because this animal tasted freedom. But if I never even knew the animal was stolen, I'm not going to know that I need to watch him more carefully. And therefore, he's at risk of getting lost again. So therefore, if you steal my animal, you need to make sure that I know you stole my animal so that I know I have to watch it a little bit more carefully.
Anybody who say this specifically because it's sheep that the sheep
I don't
go
know.
differently.
Really?
They go in packs.
I'm just using an example of sheep. I guess it could have been cows. Maybe not. I don't know. Oh, you're right. The Mishnah says play. You're right. It
says 11
maybe it is a 11. I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know much about sheep, unfortunately. Umi Amar Rava, but the Gemara says, so it sounds like Rava Paskind, like Rav Chizda, who I think happened to be his father-in-law, so that would make sense. But it sounds like Rava Paskind, like Rav Chizda, in that he's answering up the Mishnah for Rav Chizda. But is it really true that Rav Chizda says that if you knew something was stolen, you wouldn't have needed to notify him anymore? Amar Rava, hi man, the Chazia lachavre, the Agba Imra Me'edra, if you're an owner and you see someone in the distance lifting up one of your sheep out of the Eder to steal it, Edra Dide, Barama Bekala, so you shout and you're like, hey, put that sheep down. Bishadya, right? So the guy does, he drops it down. But below Yada, Ihadra, Ilohadra, but it sounds like the owner, he never really counted his sheep. He doesn't really know if it was returned or it wasn't returned. Umeso Nignav, Chayev Bachar Yuso, and it sounds like if anything happened to the sheep, it would have been chayiv, right? My lav, afagav the money. Wouldn't you say that this is true, even though you counted? So again, what was Rav Chizda's thing? If I know something was stolen, you don't need to necessarily tell me it was stolen. So long as I'm able to count the sheep, it would be fine. But in this case, it sounds like you have an owner. He knows something was stolen. He sees it, put back, and yet we still say the guy is chayiv, presumably because we require the guy to come over and notify that something was stolen. Gemara says, lo money, maybe not. Maybe that case, the only reason why that guy's chayiv is the owner, maybe in the distance, he saw someone potentially steal something, but he wasn't able to count him up. He wasn't exactly sure that it was back, and then something happened to this animal, and maybe that's why the ganav is going to be chayiv. So again, we just kind of made a new kimta to back out of this question. But ultimately, maybe Rava still holds like Rav Chizda. But the Gemara says, what about Rav, right? Rav, his halacha was that if the owner knows it was stolen, then you got to notify the owner. If he doesn't know it was stolen, you don't need to notify the owner. It's enough that the owner himself counts his animals and realizes everything's back. Rav Hachi, did Rav really say this? Rav once said, so long as you put an animal back in its pen, even out in the midbar where no one is aware, right? Still, you're going to be yotze. Why is that the case? It sounds like the guy needs to at least be able to count it to know that his animal is back. And when it's out in the midbar, maybe he can't even count it. So why are you yotze? So Amar Rav Chana bar Abba Moja Rav Biraku Usa. You'll have to tell me again. We'll just make a new kinta. That animal was like a spotted animal. The guy's going to know when that animal's missing. He's going to know when that animal's back, and that's why it's okay to even return that animal without notifying anyone, even if we know he didn't count up his animals, because that's an animal that he's going to know whether he has or he doesn't have. Okay. Lema Kitanai. We're going to have machlokas, and we're going to try to fit this machlokas tanaim into the 4 ways of understanding our Mishnah. So Hagonev Tle Mina Eder. This is is it a Mishnah? Oh, it seems like a Mishnah about Mitzvah. So I guess we'll see it in about, give or take, about a month and a half. So Hagonev Tle Mina Eder. Let's say you steal a tle from a pen, or v'selam in a kiss, or you steal money from someone's kiss. So l'makam shaganav yachzer divrei Rishmal says all you got to do is put the money back, put the thing back in the Eder. You don't have to tell anyone. That's all you have to do. For Rabbi Akiva Omer, tzarach das bailim. Rabbi Akiva says no, you got to actually tell the bailim that what you did. So the Gemara says like this. Now, one of the things that's going on in the background here is this Mishnah or Brisa, whichever it is, had 2 cases, and it's a little unclear why we needed 2 cases, seemingly saying the same thing twice, right? Whether the examples with a sela and a kiss, or the example is a tla and an eder, the bottom line is, Rabbi Akiva says you got to tell the owner. Rabbi Shmuel says you don't need to tell the owner, so why do we need both cases? So the Gemara says like this. So each of them, the assumption right now is each of them hold of this concept from Rabbi Yitzchak. The Rabbi Yitzchak, Adam Rabbi Yitzchak says that when it comes to money in a money bag, people always know how much money they have. So the assumption is that at all times people know how much money they have. So my lav besela ledas v'plukta d'Rav Shmuel. So in the case of the sela, everyone assumes that the owner knows that the money was returned because he knows how much money he has. So this machlokas is the machlokas of Rav and Shmuel in our Mishnah, or the way they understood our Mishnah. right? Which is in a case where an owner knows something was stolen, do you need to tell him or do you not need to tell him? Rav says you need to tell him. Shmuel says you don't need to tell him. And that's the machlokas, Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Akiva says you need to tell the person. Rabbi Shmuel says you don't need to tell the person. Bitleh, and then the other machlokas in this, whether it's a Bryce or a Mishnah, I didn't look it up. The machlokas with the tleh is shalol l'das. That's where a guy doesn't necessarily know that a tleh was taken from his pen. And this would be the machlokas, the other machlokas Amoraim that we had. Right, Reb Chizda says that where the guy doesn't know something was stolen, you need to tell him. And Reb Yochanan says, no, even if he didn't know, so long as he's able to count and not even if he didn't know, you don't even need to tell him or anything. So what he doesn't know can't hurt him. Maybe that's the machlokas Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel in the case of the tleh. And this is very good because now we have an understanding of why the Bryce needed two examples. You're trying to teach me two different nekudas of why they argue. One in the case where the owner knows something's missing in the case of the money, and one in the case of the tleh where he wouldn't necessarily know something's missing. But Amar is vidmishmein to Rabba. He says, no, I'll tell you that maybe this is not at all what's going on. We're dealing with a shomer, shaganav, mershus bailim. In a case where you have a shomer, let's say a shomer chinam, and he steals it from the rishus of the bailim. Maybe everyone would agree in that sort of scenario, like Reb Chizda. Normally, in a case where a person steals from an owner and he doesn't even know about it, you always need to tell the owner. But v'hacha, what's unique about our case? It's a shomer shaganav mirashu so. And sheyachzir l'makom shaganav kimifugi. We're dealing with a case of, let's say, a shomer chinam. A shomer chinam has, let's say, a tleh, whatever our case is, and all of a sudden he decides, while the tleh is in his house, I'm gonna steal this tleh. I'm going to claim that it was lost. I'm going to claim it was stolen. I'm going to steal this tleh. That was his machshava. And then he has remorse. He's like, you know what? I'm not going to steal it. So that's this machlokas Rabbi Akiva ve Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Akiva savar kol shelo shmiraso. Rabbi Akiva says, once I have that machshava that I want to be a ganav, I'm no longer a shomer chinam, and now I need to return it back to the owner. Rabbi Shmuel savar lo kol shelo shmiraso. No, I'm still a shomer chinam, and therefore I don't need to tell anyone. No harm, no foul. As long as I decide I'm not going to be a ganav, it's fine. I can keep it in my house. I don't need to do anything. And that is how you understand this machlokas, Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael. But the Gemara says one more time before the Mishnah, Lema minyan poter tanahi. In all of the four Amoraim, Rav was the only one that said that when the person knew that something was stolen, you have to notify him. Everyone else, all of the other shita said, so long as the guy knew something was stolen, minyan is going to be okay. Rav was the only one that said if the owner knew that something was stolen, you have to tell him. So the Gemara says maybe this is Guva Machlokas Tanaim as well. The Tanya, we have a Brisa. It's a Brisa in Bava Metzia. We're like foreshadowing what we're going to be doing over the next few months. So Hagozel es Chavero. Let's say you steal money from your friend. So I steal $100 from Mark. I feel really bad about it. Then turns out I need to give Mark $100 for something else. So I just give him $200. I don't tell him anything. I just kind of give him $200, and then that's it, without saying anything to him. Tani chada yatza. One of the Bryces says that's okay. But Tani idach lo yatza, and one of them says it's not okay. So how do we understand the stira and the Bryces? So really, we can assume that everyone holds of this concept of Yitzchak. The Amar Adam Asur Lamashish Bekisa B'Chavshavasha. So the assumption is that the Mark in our example always knew that $100 was gone, and then he just got repaid the $100. And my lab b'hakim, and maybe this is group of the machlokas of the two Bryces. Demand Amar Yatza Savar Patra. The Bryce that says that you are Yotze, you're Din Hashava. That's like the other three Amoraim that say that so long as the guy knew something was stolen, you don't need to tell him that you stole it. You just need to pay him back. And he'll know that he was paid back because the guy always knows how much money he has. So that's why you're Yotze. Umanda Amar Lo Yatza. And the Manda Amar that says you're not Yotze like this, Savar Minyan Eno Poter. He holds like Rav, that so long as Mark knows that someone stole money, I now need to tell Mark that I stole the money and I'm returning the money. It's not enough to just pay him back, even if he knows he was paid back. Amri, the Gemara says, no, it's not muchach that way, because each Yirlan Rev Yitzchak, Kuli Alma Lo Pligidi Minyan Poter. I'll agree with you. If everyone holds up Rev Yitzchak halacha, then everyone's going to say the minyan's poter. Maybe they're arguing this point of Rev Yitzchak. Mar Islay Rev Yitzchak, the one who says that your Yotze holds Rev Yitzchak, he holds that Mark is definitely going to know that he was paid back. Mar, let's say Rabbi Yitzchak, but the other Brisa says we don't necessarily hold of this concept of Rabbi Yitzchak. Therefore, Mark might not know that he was repaid. And then I'm not Yotze. I need to tell Mark. I need to let Mark know that he got his money back. Another answer the Gemara gives is the Kuliyam Islu Rabbi Yitzchak. Really, everyone agrees to this concept of Rabbi Yitzchak that people are constantly feeling their money bags to know how much money they have, but below kasha, still it's not a kasha. Ha the money v'ramale bekise, ha the money v'ramale liade. In the case where it's Yotze, where you put the money in his money bag, he always knows how much money he has in his money bag. But the other case is you didn't put it in his money bag; you put it in his hand. Rashi doesn't really explain, and it's not the easiest svara, but I think what's happening here is if you just put the money in Mark's hand, he doesn't necessarily know how much money he has until he kind of settles up, puts it in his bag, goes home and counts all of his money. If it's only in his hand, then maybe he'll spend it, maybe he'll give it to his wife, maybe he'll, whatever it is, he's not necessarily going to appreciate that you repaid the quote. He's not going to appreciate that he's $100, he has $100 more than he should have had. He'll only recognize that once it goes in the kiss, but it might not make it to his kiss. If you just give him, you give him cash, now he might go to drool and might spend it. He might never realize that he ever had more money than he was supposed to have. The Bias name, a very similar answer is Edi the money Rama Bakise. Both Bryces will say where you did put it in his money bag, and they each hold of this concept of Rabbi Yitzchak. So in theory, he should know how much money he has. But the only time we say that people know how much money they have is when that's the only money in your kiss. If you had other money in the kiss and now you're putting this money in, he might just lose cheshbon. And again, the point is he might not realize that you repaid the money. And now we get to the fourth and final Mishnah, which is by far the easiest of the day. So for those cases, we're dealing with you're stealing money. So it's very possible, you're right. We're probably focusing just on the Dine Mominus. You're right. There's no Knas, you might have to pay the kefal and stuff like that. And clearly he needs kapara. This guy's a bad dude. But from a paying back the keren, does he Yotzi that or was he not Yotzi that? That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's what, one of the reasons for the das we've been, because you can't get a code for unless he tells the person who stole it.
Yeah.
But
you mean the kefal?
No, in this case where it says, if he returned it, and the person never knew it was gone.
Yeah.
So some say he doesn't have to say it, some say he does. I'm saying I would think that he always has to say he did it.
It's got a kapara or something, yeah.
But then again, what happened to? Does he have to do for the fifth act?
So again, the fifth person, the fifth, right? I just don't want to mix up sugyas. The fifth is a very special halacha when you make shvuas and you deny them. That's when you're chayiv the chomesh, yasham gzelos, and the kefal also is only when you went to court, right? A modeh knas is always going to be pater on the knas. So it's possible that this guy doesn't even owe the kefal, right? He only owes the keren. But you know what I mean?
Okay, I got it.
Yep. Okay. Fourth and final. Yes. Sure. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's all good.
You're going to take me?
I'll take you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. For sure.
This is going to be a tough day.
Oh, yeah.
I'm afraid. I hope he takes me in for therapy.
I think he will. All right. So fourth and final Mishnah, and then we'll hand it off to Yoel for tomorrow's the last daf. So ein lochin min haroim, you are not allowed to buy certain items from shepherds. Semer, chalav, gedim, wool, or milk, or these young, whatever these things are, goats or young sheep, whatever they are. Why? Because the assumption is that they might not belong to them, right? These are shepherds, they're with these animals. So maybe they're, these are products that really belong to the owner. So you can't buy them from the shepherd. Below Shomer Peiros, you also can't buy from Shomer Peiros, Eitzimu Peiros, wood or Peiros, same idea. Maybe they're not theirs to sell. Avalokhin, Minhan Nashim, but you are allowed to buy from women, clay Semer, Yehuda, clay Pishton, Galil, Va'agalim, Bisharon. So Rashi says these are in various locales. Women were known to sell these items, and the fear might be that they don't really have their husband's consent, and technically the husband really owns these things, that the women are selling them without the husband's consent. Maybe it's some sort of xela or a kaneva, whatever it is. But you can assume that in these places, women have the permission of their husbands, and therefore you're allowed to buy from them, no worries. But for Kulan, when it comes to the women, in all these cases, Kulin sha'amru lahatmin asr. If the women literally tell you, by the way, I'm selling this to you, but like don't publicize this, then you have to be a little bit more suspect, and you shouldn't buy it from those women. But lochim beitzim, if it's arnagolim b'chamakom, you are allowed to buy eggs and chickens anywhere, because the assumption is that these items are so cheap that even the owner isn't going to be mocked if the shepherd, sells these items. Okay, Taner Rabbanan, a very similar brisa. Ein lokhin min haroim. You're not allowed to buy from roim lo izim below gedim, not izim, not gedim. Again, the younger animals below gizin. I think these are fleeces below tlushin shel tzemer or wool. Avalokhin mehen. But you are allowed to buy like ready-made shirts, like items that are sewn, right? And this is a Baba Kama concept, nation shalahen, because even on that side that they stole those items, once they make a shirt out of it, now they're already konev it, shinoi meister, or whatever it is. So therefore, from your perspective, these things they belong to the roa, and therefore you're allowed to buy it from them. Mehen chalav ugvina b'midbar. Even though our mission said you're not allowed to buy chalav, this price says you are allowed to buy chalav or gvina if you're out in the midbar. Below the yishuv, but you're not allowed to buy it close to the yishuv, right? The explanation is if it's out in the midbar, right, you got to milk these animals, right? And the milk's going to go bad. The owner is not schlepping out to the midbar every single day to collect his milk. So the assumption is that let the shepherd out there in the midbar, let him sell to whoever needs milk out over there, right? It's going to go to waste otherwise. But in the yishuv, that's where the owner would go every single day to collect the milk, so the shepherd can't sell it in the yishuv. But lokhin mehen dalit beheit tzon, you're allowed to buy from a shepherd 4 or 5 tzon dalit beheit. He's in 4 or 5 fleece. Avalo shtei tzon v'lo shtei gizim, but you can't buy 2. And again, the Gemara is going to have a few questions on this. What do you mean 4 or 5? Right? Also, what happened to 3? 4 or 5, you can. 2, you can't. What about 3? So the Gemara is going to ask these questions. Rabbi Yehuda Omer baisos lokhin mehen. You are allowed to buy domesticated animals from these shepherds. Midbarios and lochaman, but you're not allowed to buy these midbarios animals. And the Gemara and the Brisa just thumbs up. Klolo shel davar kol sheharoa mocher balabais margishbo lochaman ain margishbo ain lochaman. So what's pshat in all of these last few cases? Why are you allowed to sell 4 or 5? Why are you allowed to sell this? The bottom line is like this: if you're selling something where the owner would notice it's gone, then you can assume that the guy is not selling the owner's thing because he would get caught. Right? So if the shepherd is selling 4 or 5 animals, you can assume it's the shepherd's animals. If he's only selling 1 or 2, maybe he's trying to like pull something, right? Maybe he's trying to get away with something. So you can't buy 1 or 2, but if he's selling 4 or 5, then already you can assume it's his animals that he's selling. Okay. Amar Mar, getting back into this brisa. Lokhan mehen dalid vehei tzon, dalid vehei gizin. You're allowed to sell 4 or 5 of the tzon or 4 or 5 of the gizin. So the Gemara says, our bazav nina. If you tell me you're allowed to buy 4, what does this mean 4 or 5? Right? If you're allowed to sell 4, then for sure you can sell 5. No. This is a massive chiddush in understanding this price. What he means is you're only allowed to buy it from him if he's selling 4 out of 5, meaning 80%. That's the only time you can be so sure that he's selling his own stuff, if he's selling 80% of whatever he's shepherding. But if he's selling anything less than that, you have to be concerned that maybe he's selling something of the owners and he's going to have some story for why he just wiped out half of his flock. But the point is, that's how the only time you could ever be sure enough to buy animals from a shepherd is if he's selling 80% of the entire flock. The Ika da Amri Amr is some had a different version of this answer, and it was Arba me Eder Katan, B'chamesh me Eder Gadol. And maybe it's more of a sliding scale, meaning what the Bryce is saying is, when are you allowed to buy 4? That's when it's maybe a bit of a smaller flock. When the flock gets a little bit bigger, then the number would have to be 5. If the number gets a little bit bigger, maybe the number would have to be 6. But the point is there's some sort of sliding scale. It's not 4 or 5. It just depends on the size of the Eder. But again, the klolo shel davar, which the Bryce said, is you always have to say, would an owner appreciate that these items are missing, right? And it's only if the answer to that question is yes, that's when I'm allowed to buy from the shepherd. But then the Gemara says the question that we also spoke on, which is Haguva Kasha, Amar Dalad Behei Tzon, Dalad Behei Gizin, sounds like Dalad Behei In, Aval Shalosh Lo, 4 or 5 you can sell. If he's trying to sell you 3, you can't buy that from him, right? But Ema Sifa, Aval Shtei Tzon, sounds like he can't sell you 2 Tzon, Shalosh Savdinan. But then it sounds like if he can't sell you 2, it sounds like he can sell 3. So which one is it? Can you buy 3 or can you not buy 3? Mar says Lokasha, Habit Brayasa, and Habe Klishka. It really just depends on the animals themselves. Are they healthy animals? Are they good animals? And for sure, of course, you can buy 3 because that's something that the owner would notice. If they're weaker animals, then you shouldn't buy 3 because that's something that the owner might not notice. Yehuda Omer, Baisos Lochaman, Midbarios and Lochaman. Domesticated animals you can buy, Midbarios you cannot buy. Nibayalahu, the Gemara said, Rav Yehuda, Aresha, Kai Ulachumra, Odilma Asefa Kai Ulachula. Which clause is he going on? And the nafkamina will be if he's being more machmer than the Tanakama or more makel. The Gemara is going to explain. Aresha Kai Ulachumra Damar, is he going on the Resha and therefore he's really saying a Chumra? What does that mean? Lokchen Mehan Arba B'chamisha, right? The Tanakama said you're allowed to buy 4 or 5 stone. Comes along Rabbi Yehuda and says, Hani Mili buys 4 or 5. That's only in a case where they're domesticated. These are good animals. Avomidbarios, where there are weaker animals, then you would need to buy much more than that because 4 or 5 isn't enough. The owner might not notice that. Oh, Dilma, Asefakai, maybe you'll learn it the other way. Ulakula to Amar, right? The Tanakama said Avalo Shteitson, below Shteigis, and the Tanakama said you can't buy 2 son or gizin, and comes along Rabbi Yehuda and he says, Hani Milibarios. You can't buy 2. That's Dafka those Mibarios. They were domesticated animals. You could even buy 2 because again the owner would notice if 2 of those good animals were gone. So how do you understand Rabbi Yehuda? Is he trying to be more machmir than the Tanakama or more mekel? Tashma, we answer to Tanya Rabbi Yehuda Omer Lokhin Baisos Mehan Ve Lokhin Mehan Mibarios. This was like our brisa. Rabbi Yehuda says you can buy the domesticated animals, you can't buy them in barrios, but you can always you can always in all situations, even in the midbar, you can always buy the 4 or the 5. And from the fact that this brisa adds the words that he's saying in all situations you can always buy these midbarios, these 4 or 5 of even these midbarios. Therefore, we know he's coming on the Seifa and to be more makel than Tanakh.